While cleaning the apartment, a widow found money her husband had hidden. When she looked inside, she was left astonished. It's been a little over a year since Mark passed. The first 6 months were a blur of condolences, casseroles from neighbors, and a hollow ache in our quiet house in Raleigh. The second 6 months were about learning to live with the silence, waking up and making coffee for one, watching our shows alone on the big couch we bought together. It was a slow, painful process of accepting that my life partner, the man I'd spent 15 years with, was gone forever. The grief was like a heavy blanket, and for the longest time, I just didn't have the strength to push it off. But today, a bright Saturday in early May, I felt a flicker of something different, a need for change. I decided to tackle the one room I had sealed off since the funeral, Mark's office. The air in the room was stale, thick with the scent of old paper and the lingering, faint smell of his cologne that clung to the leather chair. A thin layer of dust covered everything, a perfect snapshot of a life interrupted. I started slowly, sorting through stacks of trade magazines and old project files. It was mechanical work, a way to keep my hands busy and my mind from drifting. I packed his books into boxes, donated his old suits that still hung in the closet, and wiped down the surfaces until the dark cherry wood of his desk gleamed again. It was as I was vacuuming the old Persian rug that I noticed it. Near the wall, under the desk, one of the hardwood floorboards seemed just a fraction of an inch higher than the others. I'd never noticed it before. Mark was so meticulous, so detail-oriented. A loose floorboard was not his style. Curiosity got the better of me. I turned off the vacuum, the sudden silence of the house rushing back in. I knelt down, my knees cracking, and pressed on the board. It gave a little with a soft groan. Using my fingernails, I managed to wiggle the end of the board up. It wasn't nailed down. It had been cut precisely to be lifted. My heart started to beat a little faster. What was this? A secret? Mark and I didn't have secrets, or so I thought. I lifted the board away and peered into the dark space below. There, nestled between the joists, was a small metal lockbox. It wasn't big, maybe the size of a shoebox, and it was surprisingly heavy when I lifted it out. There was no key, of course, but the lock was simple, the kind you could find on a diary. I went to the kitchen, grabbed a screwdriver and a small hammer, and after a few awkward attempts, the lock popped open. My breath caught in my throat. The box was filled with money, stacks of $100 bills, neatly bundled with rubber bands. I didn't count it right away, but it looked like a fortune, tens of thousands of dollars. Where did this come from? Mark's salary as a senior project manager was good. We were comfortable, but we didn't have this kind of cash just lying around. We had our joint savings, our retirement accounts, everything meticulously planned and tracked. This was something else. This was secret money. But as I lifted the top bundle, I saw what was underneath. It wasn't just cash. There was a small ornate silver key, the kind for a post office box or a small locker. And under that, a stack of letters, tied together with a simple blue ribbon. My hands trembled as I picked them up. The handwriting on the envelopes was feminine, elegant, and they weren't addressed to our home. They were addressed to a P.O. box downtown. It was the sight of all that cash, so cold and foreign, that threw me backward in time. Instantly, I wasn't in the dusty office anymore. I was back in my car on a cold November night 2 years ago, the night the first tiny hairline crack appeared in the foundation of my perfect marriage. It had been a Thursday night. Mark had a big end-of-quarter celebration with his company, Henderson Corp. It was a formal affair at the Raleigh Grand, a fancy hotel downtown. He'd kissed me goodbye, looking handsome in his charcoal suit. "Don't wait up, honey," he'd said. "It's going to be a late one, lots of speeches." I was fine with that. I had a new book to read and was looking forward to a quiet evening. Around 10:30 p.m., my phone rang. It was Mark. "Hey, Sarah," he said, his voice a little fuzzy, like the reception was bad. "Listen, this thing is dragging on way longer than I thought. A bunch of us are going to hang out for a bit after. My phone's at 2%, it's about to die. Could you be a sweetheart and swing by to pick me up around midnight? I'll meet you out front." It was a simple request. "Of course, sweetie," I said. "No problem. See you at midnight. You're the best. Love you," he said, and the line went dead. I finished my chapter, put on a warm coat, and left the house around 11:40 p.m., giving myself plenty of time. The drive downtown was quiet, the streets slick with a light drizzle. I felt a familiar warmth in my chest. We had such a good, solid marriage. He was a good man, a great provider, my best friend. I felt so lucky. I pulled up to the grand entrance of the hotel at exactly midnight. The circular driveway was empty except for a lone taxi. I parked in a spot with a clear view of the main doors and sent him a quick text. "I'm here out front." No reply. I wasn't worried. He'd said his phone was dying. I waited. 5 minutes passed. 10. The rain started coming down a little harder, tapping a gentle rhythm on the roof of my car. I watched the hotel doors. A few couples came out, laughing as they ran under the awning to the valet. No Mark. After 20 minutes, a little knot of annoyance started to form in my stomach. I hated when he was late without notice, but his phone was dead, so I couldn't really blame him. Maybe the party was still going. At 12:30 a.m., after a full half hour of waiting in the cold car, my patience wore thin. This was ridiculous. I decided to go inside. The lobby was grand and mostly empty. A lone clerk was behind the massive marble front desk. I walked up, my shoes clicking on the polished floor. "Excuse me," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "I'm looking for the Henderson Corporation party? I'm supposed to be picking up my husband." The young man looked at me with a polite, but confused, expression. "The Henderson event, ma'am?" he said, tapping on his computer screen. "That ended hours ago. They were out of the ballroom by 9:45 p.m. The cleaning crew has already been through." My blood went cold. "What? No, that can't be right. My husband just called me, well, a couple hours ago. He said it was running late." The clerk just gave me a sympathetic shrug. "I'm sorry, ma'am. The ballroom is on the second floor. It's empty." I stood there for a moment, my mind refusing to process his words. Ended at 9:45? He called me at 10:30. Where was he calling from? Why would he lie? My mind scrambled for a logical explanation. Maybe he and his coworkers went to the hotel bar. Yes, that had to be it. I thanked the clerk, my voice sounding distant to my own ears, and walked towards the dimly lit bar at the far end of the lobby. I peeked inside. The bar was quiet, with only a handful of people scattered around. A couple in a corner booth, a businessman reading on a tablet. No Mark, no group of loud guys from his office. The knot in my stomach tightened into a ball of ice. Something was wrong. This wasn't just him being late, this was something else. I went back to my car, my mind racing. What do I do? Do I call his friends? I didn't want to seem like a hysterical, overbearing wife. "Oh, Sarah's calling, Mark must be on a short leash," they'd joke. So I just sat there, in the dark, staring at the hotel doors, feeling foolish and increasingly scared. The minutes ticked by like hours. 1 o'clock, 1:15. Just as I was about to give up and go home, I saw a familiar figure walking out of the hotel. It was Dave Chen, one of Mark's colleagues. He was holding an umbrella and walking quickly toward the parking garage. On sheer impulse, I flashed my headlights. He squinted toward my car. I rolled down my window. "Dave," I called out. He looked startled to see me. He walked over, huddling under his umbrella. "Sarah? What are you doing here?" he asked, his eyes darting around nervously. "I'm waiting for Mark," I said, trying to sound casual. "He asked me to pick him up. Have you seen him?" Dave's face did something strange. It was a flicker of panic, quickly masked. "Oh, yeah, Mark. He left a while ago, said he was grabbing a cab to meet up with some old friends." He couldn't meet my eyes. He was looking over my shoulder, at the street, anywhere but at me. "A while ago, like how long ago?" I pressed. "Oh, I don't know, an hour? Maybe more," he stammered. "Hey, I gotta run, my wife's waiting." "Good to see you, Sarah," and with that, he practically ran off toward the garage. A lie. That was a bald-faced lie. Dave was a terrible liar. My heart was hammering against my ribs. The hotel said the party ended before 10. Mark's own colleague said he left over an hour ago. But Mark called me at 10:30, telling me to come at midnight. And where was he now, at 1:20 in the morning? The fear was turning into something sharp and ugly. A deep, primal sense of betrayal. On a hunch, a desperate, Sick feeling guiding me, I put the car in drive. I didn't go home. I turned away from the hotel's main entrance and drove around the block, onto a darker, quieter side street, lined with smaller office buildings and boutique shops, all closed for the night. And that's when I saw him. About 200 feet ahead, standing under a broken street lamp, was Mark. My relief lasted for a single second before it was crushed by what I saw next. He wasn't waiting for a cab. A sleek, black sedan, a car I'd never seen before, was idling by the curb. He opened the passenger door and leaned in. I was too far away to see the driver clearly, but I could tell it was a woman from the silhouette and long hair. He spoke with her for a moment, then he reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a thick, white envelope and handed it to her. He patted her hand, then closed the door, and the car smoothly pulled away into the night. Mark stood there for a moment, watching it go, before turning and starting to walk back in the direction of the hotel. I was frozen. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. An envelope, a strange woman, a secret meeting on a dark street. My mind was a whirlwind of confusion and pain. I quickly did a U-turn, my tires squealing softly on the wet pavement, and drove back around to my original parking spot in front of the hotel. I felt numb, like I was watching a movie of someone else's life. A few minutes later, Mark's figure appeared, walking casually toward the car. He opened the passenger door and slid in, bringing a gust of cold, rainy air with him. "Hey," he said, smiling, though he looked tired. "Sorry about that. My phone died right after I called. Got caught up chatting with the guys from the Charlotte office. You wouldn't believe how long Tom can talk about quarterly projections." The lie was so easy, so perfect. He didn't have a clue that I'd seen him. The drive home was the longest 15 minutes of my life. The silence in the car was deafening. I could feel my own heartbeat in my ears. Mark yawned and stretched. "Man, I'm exhausted." "Long night," he said, trying to fill the quiet. I didn't respond. I just kept my eyes fixed on the road, the red taillights of the cars ahead blurring through the tears welling in my eyes. I was terrified of the answer, but I knew I couldn't live with the not knowing. We were a block from our house when I finally spoke, my voice a strained whisper. "Where were you, Mark?" He turned to look at me, his brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean? I told you, I was with the guys from—" "Don't lie to me," I cut him off, my voice shaking with a rage I didn't know I possessed. "The party ended at 9:45. I asked at the front desk, and I talked to Dave. He said you left a long time ago, so I'm asking you again. Where were you?" The smile on his face vanished. He looked trapped. "Sarah, what is this? An interrogation?" Dave must have been mistaken. It was a long night, people were all over the hotel. His defensiveness was all the proof I needed. I took a deep, shuddering breath and delivered the final blow. "I saw you, on Franklin Street. I saw you get out of a black car. I saw you hand an envelope to a woman. Who is she, Mark? What was in that envelope?" The car fell into a dead silence. I pulled into our driveway and cut the engine. He didn't move. He just stared out the windshield, his face pale in the faint glow of the dashboard lights. The happy, confident man I married was gone. In his place was a stranger. When he finally turned to me, his eyes were filled with a deep, weary sadness. "It's not what you think," he said softly. "Please, Sarah, you have to believe me." He told me she was an old friend from college, someone who had fallen on incredibly hard times. She was a single mother, he said, and she'd lost her job. He was just helping her. The envelope was cash to help her pay her rent and buy groceries for her son. He swore to me there was nothing romantic between them. It was an obligation, he said, a promise he'd made a long time ago to always look out for her if she needed it. "Why the secrecy, Mark?" I sobbed. "Why all the lies?" "Because I didn't want you to worry," he said, his voice pleading. "I knew you wouldn't understand. It's my burden to carry, not yours. Please, can we just drop it? For our sake, please don't ask any more questions." I looked at his face, so earnest and pained, and I wanted to believe him more than anything in the world. I was exhausted and heartbroken, so I did the one thing I would regret for the rest of my life. I nodded. I agreed to let it go. We never spoke of it again. And now, Sitting on the floor of his dusty office 2 years later, I was holding the truth in my hands. The box of money wasn't for his retirement. It was for her. I untied the blue ribbon, my fingers fumbling. I pulled out the top letter and unfolded it. The date at the top was from about a week before that night. I started to read. "My dearest Mark," it began. "I don't know how we can keep this up. Seeing you for stolen hours isn't enough anymore. Liam asks about you every day. He misses his daddy." My vision swam. Liam. He'd said she had a son, her son, but the next line took the air from my lungs. "He has your eyes, you know. Every time he looks at me with that serious expression, I see you. I wish you could be here to see him blow out his candles next month. 5 years old. Our boy is growing up so fast. Our boy, not her boy, our boy." I dropped the letter as if it had burned me. I frantically tore through the others. They weren't letters from an old friend in need. They were love letters. Passionate, detailed letters spanning the last 6 years. They talked about secret weekend trips, about holidays he spent on business trips, about building a future together. He had a second family, a whole other life he'd been living just 40 miles away in Durham. The P.O. box, the secret cash, the silver key, I realized with a jolt, was probably for their apartment. The man I had loved, the man I had mourned for a year, was a complete stranger. The entire foundation of my life, my 15-year marriage, was a lie. He didn't just cheat on me, he had built an entire parallel existence. The grief I had felt for the past year curdled into something else entirely. It was a hollow, echoing emptiness. The person I was grieving had never even existed. I sat there on the floor for what felt like hours, surrounded by the evidence of my husband's profound deception. The money, which had at first seemed like a shocking windfall, now felt dirty, like the wages of betrayal. My first instinct was to destroy it all, to burn the letters, to throw the cash into the fireplace, and watch 15 years of lies turn to ash. It was his secret, his sin, and I wanted it gone. But then my eyes fell on the letter I had dropped, on the words, "Our boy." Liam. A little boy who was now 6, almost 7. A little boy who had just lost his father. He was the innocent in all of this. Whatever sins Mark and this woman had committed, this child had done nothing to deserve being a part of it. He was a victim just as much as I was. That thought changed everything. Giving in to my anger felt good for a moment, but it solved nothing. It wouldn't erase the past. It wouldn't heal my broken heart. But maybe, just maybe, I could take this disgusting secret and turn it into something that wasn't entirely poison. The next Monday, I put the letters and the key back in the box and pushed it to the very back of my closet, a place I would never look again. I took the cash, all $72,000 of it, and drove to my lawyer's office. I explained that I had come into some unexpected funds and I wanted to set up a trust. An anonymous educational trust for a child. Using the full name and date of birth from the letters, we created the Liam Last Name College Fund. The money would be invested and managed, untouched, until his 18th birthday, to be used solely for his tuition and educational expenses. The woman, his mother, would never know where it came from. As I signed the final document, I felt a weight lift off my chest that I hadn't even realized was there. It wasn't forgiveness. I don't think I could ever forgive him. It was something else. It was closure. I was taking control of the narrative, closing the book on Mark's terms, not mine. Walking out of the lawyer's office into the bright afternoon sun, I felt clean. The heavy blanket of grief for my perfect husband was gone, stripped away. In its place was a quiet, stark clarity. I was no longer Mark's grieving widow. I was just Sarah, and for the first time in a very long time, that felt like enough.